sort of ties into a question that I wanted to ask you around how people should actually figure out what the right property strategy is for them. Because I think with this, and especially when you've got, you've got a decent amount of money behind you, it means that you've got a lot of options that are available to you. And with property, like with money generally, I think that there's a lot of different ways to be right there, that sometimes it comes down to preference and approach. How do you think people should tackle figuring out what might actually work for them when it comes to choosing a property as an investment?
Sure. So look, for me, it's easy. I'm an accountant. I've got no emotion, so it's all numbers. But I understand not everyone's like that. But look, there's generally two main property strategies. You either kind of go blue chip near the city, so like those eastern suburbs, low North Shore in the west, and avoid the CBD because there's no limit of supply. And typically those properties, they're going to be expensive, so they're going to cost you 1 or 2 million, and the yield's only going to be about 3%. So even with our low interest rates now, after strata fees and a bit of land tax, it might be costing you $500 or $1,000 a month to cash flow it. And so that's typically what you call a capital growth kind of type strategy. You're really wanting that million to double to 2 million. Now, if you haven't got that 500 or 1,000 a month to invest or kind of force save into that property, you've got no choice. You can't get into it. And if you haven't got that $1 million serviceability with the bank to get that property, you can't get into it. So then the other strategy is more your kind of slightly more regional ones or the interstate that might only be, say, 3, 4, 5, 600 grand, but you might be getting 4, 5 or 6% rental yield, so more of a positive cash flow strategy. But instead of maybe that property going up by 10% a year, it might only be going up by 5%. So really, it's effectively a seesaw. The more capital growth you want, the less rent you're going to get. The more rent you want, then it goes down the other way. So it's some people want the nirvana. They want a bit of everything, and generally it doesn't really exist. But those positive cash flow ones, they're better for the people with lower budgets, the ones that don't want to put kind of more money in. But the downside is if it makes you another $50 a week, will that really increase your wealth? And for some people it will. And if it doesn't really grow by as much, are you going to have much after 10 or 20 years? So we know there's lots of people that have gone to like Southeast Queensland, they bought properties, given them a bit of cash flow, but they've maybe seen no growth or half the growth in 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk to a lot of people that are thinking about property, and I think it's partly just because there's so much content and noise and opinions out there with this stuff that people go, oh, I should have a positive cash flow property, or the yield needs to be really strong. But in my view, so long as you're in a position to be able to do it, as you mentioned, because you have to have the serviceability with the banks and the capital behind you potentially to get in, or the equity or whatever, and the cash flow to cover it. But buying property is really about growth for me in a lot of cases. That's where I see as the really big benefit. And you only can and you only want to really buy so many properties because there's a limit on how much you can service with the bank. So I think if you fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I should be getting a higher yield, or I do want a positively geared property or a positive income property, then yeah, you are sacrificing on that growth play. And when not that I'm a massive advocate of diving too far into the numbers, but the big upside is like you say, the property tends to double or thereabouts every 10 years. So if you can get $1 million of growth, what is the $500 a month of cash flow going to do for you in that period of time?